There are moments in your life when something shifts, quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a tremor beneath the surface of your awareness. Nothing dramatic announces it. No lightning crack splits the sky. No revelation arrives wrapped in brilliance. Instead, the world seems to pause, just long enough for you to recognize that the person you have been is no longer sufficient for the life pulling at you from beyond the horizon. It is in this thin pause, this fragile hesitation between breaths, that an ancient whisper begins to rise. Are you willing to be changed? Not improved, not optimized, not polished, changed. Transformed from the inside out in a way that does not simply refine who you are but completely redefines the edges of your becoming. This whisper is both invitation and challenge. It does not flatter. It does not soothe. It does not gently coax you toward your potential with comforting promises. Rather, it confronts you with a deeper question, one that most people avoid for their entire lives. How far are you willing to go to meet the version of yourself that waits beyond your excuses, your habits, your fears, and your comfortable illusions? This question, sharp and unrelenting, is the threshold of Shugyo, the kind of discipline that does not merely demand effort but demands essence. Shugyo is not practice as the modern world defines it. It is not the half-hearted repetition of tasks designed to make you slightly better. It is not a program, not a productivity system, not a lifestyle tweak. Shugyo is the stripping down of the self. It is the journey into the marrow of your being. It is the willingness to enter a fire that does not burn you for punishment but tempers you for purpose. It is discipline at its most raw and sacred. A discipline that breaks you open only to rebuild you stronger, truer, and more aligned with your deepest nature. Picture a swordsman in the early morning light, striking the same cut again and again. To an untrained eye, it looks like monotony, but within each strike lives a confrontation. With hesitation, with ego, with the impulse to settle for almost, with the subtle tremors of doubt that ripple between mind and muscle. The practice is not about the blade. It is about the barrier between who he is and who he must become. That barrier is invisible, intimate, and excruciatingly persistent. Shugyo is the process of dissolving it. This path is not limited to warriors or monks or seekers perched atop remote mountains. Shugyo appears in the everyday and the extraordinary alike. It is the artist reworking a single line until it sings with truth. It is the athlete training long after motivation has faded. It is the parent rising before dawn to create a better life than the one they inherited. It is the entrepreneur facing rejection after rejection yet still choosing to move forward. Shugyo exists anywhere a person chooses depth over ease, intention over impulse, transformation over comfort. But here lies the tension that forms the emotional core of this journey. Everyone wants the outcome of Shugyo, but few want the process. People crave mastery but resist monotony. They crave strength but avoid struggle. They crave clarity but flee introspection. They crave transformation but cling to the very patterns that prevent it. This contradiction creates a quiet suffering, a dissonance between aspiration and action, between desire and discipline. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. Transformation and comfort cannot coexist. At least not when the transformation is real. This is why Shugyo calls to only a certain kind of person, not by birth or talent, but by choice. Those who respond to its call are not the strongest or the most gifted. They are the ones who realize that the life they want requires a version of themselves they have not yet forged. And forging, by nature, is a violent refinement. It bends, it heats, it strikes, it reshapes. It demands surrender not to weakness but to the intensity of becoming. In the modern world, where convenience is worshipped and discomfort is treated as an enemy, the idea of willingly stepping into such a process seems almost rebellious. But perhaps rebellion is exactly what is needed. For without it, People drift through life half awake, half alive, trapped not by circumstance but by the smallness of their own untested selves. So the question returns, sharper now, glowing with possibility. What would happen if you stopped chasing a life that felt good and started cultivating a life that made you whole? Not a life measured by productivity metrics or social applause, but a life shaped by discipline that reveals your inner architecture. A life forged instead of found. A life earned through the courage to confront your own unrealized potential. Imagine, just for a moment, who you might become if you embraced the kind of discipline that demanded your full presence. If you stepped into a path where difficulty was not a deterrent but a doorway. If you allowed the process to strip away your excuses until only truth remained. Imagine the strength, clarity, and purpose that might emerge on the other side of such surrender. Most people walk through life believing that discipline is simply a matter of effort, an ingredient you add when motivation runs low or when your goals grow distant. They imagine discipline as a respectable inconvenience, like eating vegetables you don't enjoy or waking up slightly earlier than you'd prefer. Yet beneath this casual understanding lies a far more uncomfortable truth. The real obstacle to growth is not the difficulty of discipline, but our relationship with discomfort itself. This misunderstanding slowly erodes potential, not through dramatic failures, but through quiet avoidance, repeated over months, years, and eventually a lifetime. The deeper problem is not laziness. It is not incapacity. It is not lack of opportunity. The true problem is that most people carry a fragile relationship with themselves, one built on comfort, certainty, and emotional preservation rather than on courage, honesty, or transformation. And because of this fragility, they flee the very experiences that would strengthen them. They misinterpret friction as a sign of misalignment, hardship as a signal to turn back, and emotional discomfort as proof that something is wrong. The moment the journey becomes demanding, they assume it is no longer meant to be, not realizing that everything meant to transform them will first stretch, challenge, and confront them. The tragedy is subtle but devastating. People do not fail because they cannot handle difficulty. They fail because they treat difficulty as a verdict instead of a gateway. They believe struggle is an indication to retreat rather than a sign that they are finally touching the edges of their limitations, the very edges that must be expanded if they hope to grow. In this modern age of endless choice and instant gratification, the world has become expert at offering distractions that mimic progress without requiring transformation. You can watch endless motivational videos that stir emotion but demand nothing. You can read self-help quotes that provide comfort but no structure. You can plan, dream, visualize, and set goals so often that preparation becomes a comforting substitute for action. This creates a dangerous illusion, the belief that you are growing simply because you are thinking about growth. But real growth does not feel like inspiration. It feels like friction. It feels like resistance. It feels like the part of you that prefers ease slowly suffocating under the weight of a new standard. And because people misunderstand this feeling, they misdiagnose their experience. When discipline feels difficult, they assume they are doing something wrong. When their mind rebels, they interpret it as a sign that they are not ready. When inconsistency arises, they assume it reflects a fixed character trait rather than the simple truth. The self resists anything that threatens its comfort. There is also a quieter misunderstanding, one that hides behind good intentions. Many people believe they are aiming for improvement, but what they are truly seeking is a painless path to improvement. They want growth that does not disrupt their patterns, change that does not challenge their identity, progress that feels smooth rather than unsettling. They want the rewards of discipline without the reconfiguration of self that discipline requires. But Shugyo, true discipline, requires dismantling. It requires facing parts of yourself you have carefully avoided. It requires confronting the lies you've told yourself to preserve comfort. It requires stepping into routines that expose your impatience, your inconsistency, your excuses, your emotional volatility. It is far easier to continue believing you are almost ready than it is to confront the possibility that readiness is irrelevant. Shugyo does not wait for perfect timing. It demands surrender to the process, flaws and all. One of the great misunderstandings is the belief that transformation feels like momentum. In reality, it often feels like stillness, like doubt, like wrestling with your own impulses, like choosing consistency in moments when your emotions offer no support. The internal tension you feel during these moments is not evidence of inadequacy. It is evidence of rewriting. You are dismantling patterns that have governed you for years, and the mind naturally resists any challenge to its familiar architecture. This internal resistance is rarely loud. It does not shout. Instead, it whispers rationalizations. You've done enough for today. This isn't the right time. You're too tired, too stressed, too overwhelmed. It won't matter if you skip it just once. And because these whispers masquerade as logic, people follow them without realizing they are abandoning the very path that would have changed their lives. The descent into the problem reveals something even deeper. Most people do not truly know themselves. They know their preferences, their habits, their talents, their fears, but they do not know the limits of their endurance, the depth of their will, or the strength of their capacity for transformation. These things can only be discovered through friction, through sustained effort, through the dismantling of self-image. Without this encounter, people live within a narrow corridor of possibility, mistaking comfort for stability and stagnation for peace. Shugyo exposes this illusion with startling clarity. It reveals that the version of you you've grown accustomed to is not the real you, it is merely the untested you. And the untested you is fragile, reactive, easily overwhelmed by adversity. Shugyo does not expose this fragility to shame you, but to invite you into the arena where it can finally be transformed. This is the descent. Realizing that the greatest barrier to your potential is not the world around you, but the internal architecture built from years of avoiding discomfort. And once you see this clearly, the question becomes not whether you can change, but whether you are willing to endure the temporary dismantling required for that change to occur. At the heart of Shugyo lies a principle so ancient and so deceptively simple that many overlook its depth. True discipline is not an act of control, but an act of surrender. This idea confuses people at first because modern culture teaches that discipline means forcing yourself, pushing harder, overriding resistance with sheer will. But the deeper traditions, those shaped in temples, dojos, mountains, and quiet corners of human struggle, understood something far more profound. Discipline that depends on force is temporary. Discipline that arises from alignment is unbreakable. To understand this principle, we begin with the characters themselves. Shu means to repair, refine, or cultivate. It implies a process of restoration, as though something within you already holds a natural form that must be uncovered, not invented. Gyo means practice, path, or dedicated action. Combined, Shugyo describes a journey of returning to one's essential nature through disciplined engagement. It is not about adding something foreign to yourself, but removing what distorts you from who you are capable of becoming. This ancient understanding shifts the whole frame. Discipline is not self-oppression. It is self-liberation. You do not practice Shugyo to dominate your impulses, but to free yourself from the impulses that dominate you. You do not walk the path to prove your strength, but to discover the strength buried beneath your own avoidance. Shugyo is not a test you must pass. It is a process that reveals the truth of what is already within you. In classical sword schools, a beginner would practice the same fundamental cut thousands upon thousands of times. This was not because teachers lacked imagination, nor because the students lacked variety. It was because repetition dissolves illusion. At first, the student strikes with emotion. excitement, anxiety, eagerness, or frustration. Later, they strike with muscle memory. Later still, they strike with technique. But eventually, after enough repetition, all those layers fall away and something extraordinary emerges. Clarity without effort, presence without noise, action without hesitation. This is the moment when the sword no longer moves from the self but through the self. And that shift is the essence of Shugyo. This reveals a core truth. Mastery is not the multiplication of technique, but the elimination of interference. The same principle applies whether one is training with a sword, meditating in a monastery, running a business, writing a novel, or rebuilding a life. The greatest breakthroughs occur not when we add more effort, but when we remove the inner obstacles that distort our natural capacity. Fear, impatience, doubt, ego, distraction, and the endless mental chatter that fractures our focus. Another ancient teaching embedded in Shugyo is the relationship between discomfort and awakening. In traditions like Zen, Shugyo often involved deliberate encounters with physical or mental strain, not as punishment but as purification. Sitting in zazen for hours is not meant to torture the legs. It is meant to reveal the mind's reactions. Walking barefoot up a cold mountain path is not meant to create suffering. It is meant to teach presence amid sensation. Enduring rigorous training is not meant to create toughness for its own sake. It is meant to burn away the excess that keeps you from seeing clearly. Through this lens, hardship becomes transformative. The cold water that shocks your system awakens vitality. The exhaustion that tests your resolve unveils the layers of your motivation. The repetition that strains your patience reveals where your ego hides. Shugyo is a mirror polished by adversity. And only in this mirror do you see the parts of yourself that routine comfort keeps concealed. But perhaps the most important principle is this. Shugyo is a voluntary confrontation with truth. Most people spend their lives avoiding truth, not out of malice, but out of fear. Truth exposes limitations. Truth reveals inconsistencies. Truth demands responsibility. Yet truth is also the only foundation strong enough to build a life of substance. In Shugyo, truth is not an abstract concept. It is a lived experience. When your body wants to stop but you continue, you meet truth. When your mind panics but you stay still, you meet truth. When you face your excuses without giving them authority, you meet truth. And with each encounter, truth frees you a little more. This is why ancient teachers often spoke of Shugyo as a kind of purification. Not purification in a moral sense, but in an experiential sense, the clearing away of what is unnecessary so that what is essential can emerge. Shugyo burns away self-deception. It exposes the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are. It reveals the habits, stories, and emotional patterns that dilute your potential. And in doing so, it invites you to step into a deeper alignment between intention and action. Another central teaching is that discipline should not be fueled by emotion. Emotions are unreliable allies. Motivation rises and falls. Excitement flickers and fades. Inspiration visits unpredictably. Shugyo teaches that true discipline must be anchored in principle, not preference. When you practice regardless of mood, you transcend the limitations of mood. When you act regardless of convenience, you transcend the limitations of convenience. When you remain committed even when the mind resists, you awaken a deeper dimension of self, one not governed by fleeting impulses. Yet this surrender to the path does not create rigidity. It creates freedom. Paradoxically, the more faithfully you follow the discipline, the freer you become. You gain mastery over your attention. Your actions become intentional. Your standards rise, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. You begin to trust yourself, not because you believe you will feel motivated, but because you know you will act with integrity. In the end, the ancient principle of Shugyo teaches this: Transformation is not achieved by force but by devotion. Devotion to the path. Devotion to truth. Devotion to becoming who you were always capable of being. The moment you understand the ancient principle behind Shugyo, discipline as surrender rather than self-oppression, the entire landscape of your life shifts. What once felt like a battle becomes a dialogue. What once seemed like a cage becomes a doorway. Instead of forcing discipline through resistance, you begin to practice it through alignment. And with this reframe, transformation stops feeling like an act of violence against the self and begins to feel like a returning home. The first reframe is this: discipline is not about becoming someone else. It is about unbecoming everything that keeps you from yourself. People often approach growth with the idea that they must add more strength, more motivation, more intensity, more structure. But Shugyo teaches subtraction. It asks you to remove noise, remove excuses, remove self-doubt, remove dependency on emotion. Growth becomes possible not through expansion alone, but through clearing away the internal clutter that has concealed your capability for years. Seen through this lens, discipline becomes less about effort and more about honesty. When you strip away distractions and confront yourself without buffering, what remains is the simple truth. You already know what needs to be done. You already know the steps. You already know where you have avoided responsibility and where you have compromised your potential. The problem is not lack of knowledge, it is lack of alignment. Which leads to the second reframe. Discipline is not a mood, it is a relationship. Most people practice discipline only when they feel like it, which means their commitment is chained to their emotional weather. But Shugyo reframes discipline as a bond, an agreement you make with yourself that remains intact regardless of discomfort, boredom, or resistance. Once this bond is formed, action becomes inevitable. You don't ask whether you are motivated. You simply do the work because that is the path you have chosen. And here comes an unexpected application. When discipline becomes a relationship instead of a performance, failure loses its emotional violence. Instead of spiraling into shame, you simply realign. You return to the path. Shugyo does not measure worth by perfection but by devotion. A missed day does not break you. Abandoning your return is what breaks you. When you understand this, consistency becomes less fragile, less punitive, and far more sustainable. Another reframe emerges from this new clarity. Discipline is a form of compassion, not cruelty. We tend to think that comforting ourselves means easing up, lowering standards, giving ourselves permission to avoid the hard things. But true compassion does not nourish your weaknesses. It empowers your strengths. Shugyo teaches that the highest form of self-kindness is refusing to let fear dictate your destiny. It is choosing the temporary discomfort that leads to lasting liberation instead of the temporary comfort that leads to long-term regret. This brings us to a powerful practical application: reframing discomfort as information. Instead of interpreting resistance as a stop sign, you interpret it as a compass. Discomfort points to places where your growth is trapped. Boredom reveals a lack of presence. Frustration exposes ego. Fatigue shows the need for pace and structure. Emotional resistance illuminates the precise entry point where transformation begins. In Shugyo, discomfort is not the enemy. It is the doorway. One of the most transformative reframes is this: discipline is easier when it becomes identity. Many people say, "I'm trying to be more disciplined," which keeps discipline as an external effort. Shugyo shifts this to, "I am someone who trains," or "I am someone who shows up," or "I am someone who honors the path." Identity shapes behavior with far more power than intention. When discipline is who you are, not something you occasionally attempt, your actions naturally align with your principles. This shift leads to another application. Anchor your discipline in environment and ritual. Shugyo practitioners of all eras understood that the environment shapes the mind. A clean training space, a dedicated time, a repeated sequence before practice, these are not trivial details. They prime the nervous system for presence. They signal the transition from ordinary life into intentional life. Rituals do not cage you. They free your mind to focus solely on the work. When your environment supports your discipline, consistency becomes a natural byproduct of design rather than a battle of willpower. But the deepest application of Shugyo comes from reframing discipline not as a path to achievement but as a path to clarity. When you commit to a disciplined practice, whether physical, artistic, intellectual, or spiritual, you learn to see yourself without distortion. You learn to distinguish between your preferences and your principles. You learn what your mind does under pressure, what your emotions do under repetition, what your spirit does under strain. You learn where you hide, where you rush, where you collapse, where you shine. This clarity is priceless because once you truly know yourself, the world can no longer manipulate you through your blind spots. This reframe changes everything. Discipline is not about controlling life. It is about controlling your relationship to life. When challenges arise, you face them instead of escaping. When opportunities appear, you step forward instead of hesitating. When setbacks strike, you remain centered instead of unraveling. Shugyo does not shield you from hardship. It equips you to meet hardship with integrity. Finally, the most liberating reframe is this: discipline is not the path to your potential. It is the expression of your potential. When you act with devotion, clarity, and consistency, you are not becoming something artificial. You are revealing what has always been dormant within you. Shugyo is not about transformation into a new being but awakening into your truest self. If this shift resonates, if the idea of discipline as liberation rings true, feel free to reflect or share your thoughts before we move on. The final section will tie everything together into transformation, challenge, and lasting insight. Transformation is not a sudden event. It is not a cinematic breakthrough or a single triumphant moment where everything shifts and you emerge renewed. Transformation is a gradual unveiling, the slow and steady emergence of a self forged through intentional friction. It is the quiet accumulation of days when you showed up despite resistance, moments when you chose presence over distraction, actions taken without applause or inspiration. Shugyo teaches that transformation happens in the spaces unnoticed by others but deeply felt by the individual who commits to the path. And it is through these small, relentless acts of surrender that a person eventually becomes unrecognizable to their former self. The truth is, the world will not acknowledge your transformation at first. It rarely recognizes the internal revolutions that precede external change. People see the results long after they've been earned, and even then, they often misunderstand the process that created them. But Shugyo is indifferent to recognition. Its rewards are not external validations but internal expansions. Clarity, resilience, presence, purpose, and an unwavering relationship with discipline that no longer depends on emotion. Transformation becomes less about becoming impressive and more about becoming whole. One of the greatest gifts of Shugyo is the way it rewires your understanding of struggle. What once felt threatening begins to feel meaningful. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once provoked avoidance becomes a signal that you are precisely where you need to be. This shift does not happen overnight. It unfolds through countless encounters with your own limitations, encounters that once triggered retreat but now invite curiosity. In this transformation, struggle becomes less a force that breaks you and more a force that reveals you. The greatest transformations often begin subtly. You notice your reactions shifting. You remain steady in moments that once unraveled you. You follow through on commitments without negotiating with your impulses. You begin to trust yourself, not in a loud, boastful way, but in a grounded, quiet way that radiates through your actions. This trust is the foundation of a new life. When you trust yourself, discipline is no longer an obligation but a natural expression of your identity. You no longer wonder whether you will follow through. You simply do. You no longer question whether you are capable. You show yourself through consistent action. Eventually, a deeper transformation emerges. The dissolution of fear around failure. Shugyo teaches that failure is not the opposite of discipline but an essential part of it. You fail, you adjust, you return. You fall, you breathe, you rise. You miss a day, you do not spiral, you recommit. The path does not punish imperfections. It absorbs them into the process. Little by little, this dismantles the shame and self-criticism that once held you hostage. Instead of fleeing from setbacks, you begin to see them as refining moments. Failure becomes feedback. Imperfection becomes instruction. And through this, you discover a profound truth. Resilience is not the ability to avoid falling, but the willingness to rise endlessly. As this transformation deepens, you begin to recognize the strength of your own presence. You start moving through life with a steady internal anchor that is not shaken by external chaos. You develop a clarity that allows you to see what truly matters and what is merely noise. You cultivate a capacity to remain intentional even when circumstances are unpredictable. Shugyo builds a person who does not rely on ideal conditions to act with integrity. Instead, it shapes someone who brings integrity into every condition. This new steadiness has a ripple effect. Your relationships change because you no longer depend on others to validate your worth. Your work changes because you approach it with a devotion that outlives motivation. Your goals change because you realize that the journey matters as much as the destination. Your inner dialogue changes because discipline has silenced the voice of self-doubt and replaced it with the quiet confidence of someone who has met themselves in difficulty and emerged stronger. And yet, even with all these transformations, the final teaching of Shugyo is the most humbling of all. The path does not end. There is no finish line, no final version of yourself, no moment when growth becomes unnecessary. The path evolves as you evolve. What challenges you today will one day become your foundation. What requires discipline now may one day become effortless presence. Shugyo is not a phase. It is a lifelong pilgrimage. And the beauty of this pilgrimage is that every step, no matter how small, carries meaning because each one draws you closer to the person you are becoming. As we reach the closing of this journey, consider the possibility that Shugyo is not merely a concept but a calling. One that invites you to live with a deeper level of honesty, courage, and devotion. It calls you to examine your habits, not with judgment, but with responsibility. It calls you to confront your fears, not with bravado, but with patience. It calls you to endure discomfort, not for suffering's sake, but for awakening's sake. It calls you to step into the fire of transformation with the understanding that the fire is not there to consume you but to refine you. And so the closing message is simple but powerful. Do not wait for the perfect moment to begin your transformation. The perfect moment is the one you choose. Every day you delay is another day offered to the weaker version of yourself. Every moment you hesitate is another moment surrendered to comfort over growth. Shugyo begins whenever you decide that your future deserves more devotion than your excuses. The challenge now is yours. Choose one commitment, small, honest, consistent, and let it become the beginning of your Shugyo. Let it be the doorway through which discipline reshapes your identity. Let it become the first flame that ignites your transformation. Walk into the discomfort, meet yourself at the edge, and discover the strength that has been waiting beneath the surface of your life. Remember this line and carry it with you. The path that breaks you is the path that builds you. Walk it with devotion.